with bipolar disorder and unipolar depression, it's about the firing of the neurons in your brain. So your brain is divided obviously in half. All the depressive, anger, agitation is on one side, and happiness, euphoria, and there's a whole bunch of other things, but that's kind of how they separate. And the neurons in your brain, the little electrical impulses that go down, they in a normal functioning brain they fire based on what's happening. So you win the lottery. Obviously, it starts firing heavy on the side that's euphoria and happiness and all this kind of stuff. Your dog dies, it goes to the other side, right? It fires, but it fires on that way intentionally, normally, because of the circumstances that you're going through. In a bipolar brain, and I'll talk about unipolar brain in just a second. In a bipolar brain, the neurons misfire. They don't know why. They do know that children of bipolar parents are 600% more likely to be bipolar than those of non-bipolar parents. The neurons fire heavy on one side, just nonstop. And then for whatever reason, they'll start moving to the other side and start firing heavy on the other side. And so while the neurons are doing that, what people are seeing in that person that has the bipolar disorder is mood swings. And unfortunately, there's nothing that a person with bipolar can do to stop the firing of those neurons on their own. You have to have medicine. They have there's a number of medicines that they use, and unfortunately, not everybody responds to the same medicine. Lithium used to be the de facto standard. You would take it twice a day. There were some unfortunate side effects, jittering of the hands. That once you got it was permanent. They came out with other medicines that were less invasive, some of them more antipsychotics. They discovered that a lot of the anti-epileptic medicines worked well, blocking chemicals at the base of your brain that helped the misfiring of the neurons. So if you look at a normal functioning brain as a flat line, and then the firing of the neurons as like a wave. In a normal functioning brain, it's like this. An occasional spike depending on what's going on, but normally it's just kind of flowing like this, like just a normal radio wave. In a bipolar brain, the curve goes way up, stays there, spikes way down, stays down there, comes way up, and you have this graph it's just enormous. Here's the problem from the point. Okay, so unipolar depression. If one is just always firing on that side that controls depression. And when your brain's misfunctioning like that, when it's malfunctioning, there's nothing you can do without help. Let's just put it that way. So if you're depressed all the time, or you're happy and depressed and agitated and stuff like that, and there's no reason why, you should probably see a psychiatrist. And there are non-invasive medicines. With me, it took about 2 years to get a list of medicines that worked well for me. This isn't something you can work out through talk therapy. If your brain is misfunctioning, you can't fix it by yourself without medicine, without God, any more than a type 1 diabetic can just meditate and make his body start producing insulin. It doesn't work that way. If it's broke, it's broke. And you either need a miracle or you need a doctor's help to give you some medicine to deal with that brokenness. And unfortunately, with mental disability, mental disorders, brain disorders, neurological disorders, there's such a stigma that comes with it. And I think it makes people afraid to talk about it. Hopefully we'll get past that, because we need to talk about it. There's no test, there's no swab to tell you if you're bipolar. If you go to a psychiatrist, they're going to look at your family history. They're going to go through what's going on in your mind. What kind of things are you thinking about during the day? They've got a long list of things. It takes about 2.5 hours for them to diagnose you. And of course, they're going to make a concerted effort to start you on medicine. So I will take this a step further as someone who suffered under bipolar disorder most of his life. I didn't know I had bipolar disorder. You don't know. I had a malfunctioning brain. The last thing that a person with a malfunctioning brain can do is self-diagnose their disorder. It doesn't work that way. You know why? Because your brain's messed up. And you see the world differently than everybody else does. When you're going through those euphoric stages of bipolar disorder, you think you can do anything. And you know what? It helped me on my job. I was getting about 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night, if that, and I could only sleep with, half a fifth of vodka. And then my brain just never shut off. Even at night, I was solving problems at work, and I was coming up with these technical solutions and all these difficult things I was working on. I was working 70-hour weeks. I didn't even care. I was never tired. But that extreme, you just think that's normal, and the people that you work for think you're a rock star. They're not like, that guy might be bipolar. He never sleeps. He's always thinking about work. No, they're like, I love that guy. We should give him a bonus. Meanwhile, you're killing yourself. Not sleeping, working all the time, not having the ability to shut your brain off. And when you have bipolar disorder, you see the world differently than everybody else does. And it's not you that has the problem, it's everybody else. And that's the way your brain thinks. It's not me. It's got to be you. Some of the symptoms that I dealt with my whole life, one of the things that really frustrated me, people would always say this to me, Jim, why don't you think before you speak? Because I would open up my mouth, and before I knew it, I was popping off with some remarks. Sometimes they were highly inappropriate in a work environment, sexist, racist, mean. And before I could even know what I'm saying, I blurted it out. And now that's good at, if you're out drinking with your buddies and you're the life of the party kind of guy. And that's what I was when I was under the effects of bipolar disorder. But the truth is, I had no control what was coming out of my mouth. It was there before I even had a chance to process what I was saying. That's part of the racing thoughts that is one of the bipolar symptoms. Your brain never shuts off. It's always going so fast that sometimes your mouth can't keep up, and you end up jumping in mid-conversation from topic to topic to topic, thinking that the person you're talking to is keeping up with you when you lost them like 4 sentences ago. That happened to me all the time. For me, growing up with a pretty violent childhood, one of physical abuse, and then just fighting at school all the time, getting beat up all the time and bullied all the time, I had succumbed at some point in my teenage years to violent thoughts and fantasies that progressed over time to murderous fantasies that would last weeks at a time, sometimes against specific people, sometimes against just another driver. And the things I would fantasize in my mind about how I'd kill him, how I'd dispose of the body, blah, blah, blah. And those kind of things over several years just became the norm for me. I didn't think anything about it. I never acted on them. I thought about them all the time, but I never acted on them. I was, worried about being a bad dad and going to prison. But I just accepted that as normal. Now, folks, that is anything but normal to be thinking about hurting people all the time, killing people all the time. That's not, there's nothing normal about that, but that's what I had accepted in my brain as that's just me daydreaming about winning the lottery and killing people. And there were a lot of other symptoms. The brain switching, I could go from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde, and just like that, I could be the life of the party. Next thing you know, I'm yelling at my wife and kids, and I don't even know why. They don't even know why. My kids told me later on that they didn't know who they were coming home to. Was it Daddy Jekyll or Father Hyde? You know how awful that is to hear from your kids. And my youngest daughter doesn't even talk to me. It's been more than 6 years. We're going up on 7 years, folks, since my youngest daughter has spoken a word, because she took the brunt of my bipolar disorder. How did I get diagnosed? Well, my first marriage was about to end after 15 years. I kept thinking about cheating on her all the time. I didn't like her. I didn't like me. I didn't like anything. I just wanted to work and make money, and we went to marriage counseling, kind of a last ditch effort, and I kind of talked about some of these things that were in my head, and the counselor said, "You need to see a psychiatrist." And she scheduled an appointment for that week. And so that week I went to the psychiatrist, and she says, "You have bipolar disorder. With your violent thoughts and fantasies, you need to be on medicine now." And they put me on this heavy antipsychotic. And that lasted for about 7 years. So I was bipolar up and, diagnosed in 2007. Lost my job because of it. Got fired. That was awful. Right after Christmas, coming back from a break they told me to take, and then saying I don't have a job, and then made up an excuse. We ended up almost going to court over it. Anyways, and so I was on medicine from 2007 to 2014, and in that 7 years I ended up going on permanent disability. With the medicines I was taking, I just couldn't function and work. Not in IT, not at the level I was used to working, and the pay I was getting. I was kind of drugged out, but it kept me from being crazy, and that's where the hard part is, right? Towards the end there, so I was on permanent disability. I was getting government checks. That's when my wife and I decided to get divorced. I wasn't bringing home the bacon anymore, so no need to be married to me. I get it. So all of that led to the events of 2013, when I went into the Welcome House shelter, and I spent Thanksgiving Day in an abandoned house, sleeping on a bed. In this abandoned house, my friend brought me a heater because there was still electricity there. I checked myself into social rehab for a weekend. They helped me get into the Welcome House, which is a home for recovering alcoholics and addicts. All that time I thought I was an alcoholic because I was drinking all the time, but it turns out what I was doing was self-medicating. I don't drink anymore, but I don't go to AA. I don't have that overwhelming urge every day to I gotta have a drink. It's nothing like that. I choose not to drink, number one, because it's not great for my testimony, and number two, it's not healthy. It's empty sugar. It's really bad for you, and it's bad for your gut, and I struggle with my weight as it is. So just cut that out. But all that time I was actually self-medicating, and that's another sign to look for people that are struggling. Are they drinking all the time? It may not be that they're an alcoholic. It may be they are. But it may be they're self-medicating. They're trying to fix something that's hurting within them. So just some things to think about. So we moved from 2013. I'm in this shelter, spent Christmas there, New Year's. I'm starting to run out of medicine. And my medicine was like $400 a month, and I didn't have the money to pay for it. And I just went to God there in that shelter. And I gave God an ultimatum, which is not the best idea, because where we see choices A and B, God sees choices C, D, E, and F. So I tell him, I'm like, God, listen, and I'm just talking to him the same way I'm talking to you right now. I'm in the shelter, and I said, either you provide a way for me to get my medicine, or you got to heal my brain, because I can't. I know what this did to my loved ones, and I don't want this. I'll never have a normal life. And I just asked him like that, do one or the other. Well, I tried every social program I could to try to get medicine, and it just wasn't available. And I just couldn't afford it. So I trusted God. Now, you know what God said to me when I told him that, when I prayed? Nothing. I heard crickets. I didn't feel the heartwarming tug of his voice or anything. Just nothing. Like he wasn't even there. But I had the faith that, okay, he's got to heal me. If he's my God, he'll heal me. Because what else am I going to do? And the medicine ran out. And I knew that the medicine stays in your system for 1 to 2 weeks afterwards. So I just told God, okay, I'm trusting you. And a week went by, no symptoms. And I was very cognizant of the symptoms, the racing thoughts, the violent thoughts and fantasies. the brain never shutting off. Oh, another week went by. All the medicine's out of my system now. No racing thoughts. I'm sleeping normally. I'm not trying to self-medicate. If I would have had a drink while I was in the house, I'd have been kicked out to the curb with no place to go in the middle of winter in Kansas City. And it was nothing. And by the time February rolled around, it had been a month, and still no symptoms. So I made a plan to get out of there, to come to Colorado, to resume my career. And that's exactly what happened. When I came here, I started seeing a psychiatrist, Dr. Rose, and we talked about what was happening with the symptoms. And she says, it's not unheard of that it would go into remission. Talking about it like it's cancer, that it would go into remission, but it's also possible it could come back. And so we agreed that I would be ready to get back on medicine if it ever did come back. And so far it hasn't. I sleep normally. Sometimes I sleep too much. I never slept my entire life until my brain stopped doing what it was doing. I can thoughtfully think before I speak and craft a response or no response at all. Sometimes it's actually just being an active listener and not forming a response, something I couldn't do before. When you started talking, I had already had the next paragraph ready. But my brain doesn't work that way anymore. Is God going to heal you? I don't know. Ask him. In the meantime, go see a doctor. Here's the other thing. And this is the hardest thing. It's the people around you that are the best judge of whether or not your brain is malfunctioning. You, yourself, are the worst judge. And it is contrary to our nature for the people that we love, our friends, our family, the people that are around us, to say, I think there's something wrong with you. I think you need to go see a psychiatrist. I think you need a doctor. I think you might need medical help. It is contrary to our nature to accept that there's something out there bigger than us that we cannot control, that we cannot beat. And it is definitely contrary to our nature for our friends or loved ones to say, you need help, and for us to be like, you know what, I think I don't think you're right, but I trust your opinion and I'm going to go to the doctor. We just don't do that. And that's why dealing with mental health is so difficult. It's just getting the person to go see a doctor and talk about what's going on in their head. We would rather deal with the symptoms and pretend that we're normal. When we're literally, because of our inability to face what we're dealing with or face the criticism or the love from other people, we're just killing ourselves. And we're okay with that because that's better than going to the doctor. So be patient with people that you believe are dealing with mental illness. The biggest thing is getting them to the doctor, convincing them to go see. And you're trying to convince somebody who's making irrational decisions because their brain is malfunctioning to make a rational decision. That's what you're up against. I don't know the best way to handle a person like that. I really don't. I really don't. But there are organizations out there that deal with mental health, that deal with bipolar disorder, and maybe we should look to them to see how we can do an intervention of this type for somebody whose brain just isn't working. Because I don't know the right answer. I really don't.